Are you in the process of creating something huge and you want to understand how others have done it? Or have you already found success and still feel something is missing? Then this podcast is for you. Welcome to the Alchemist Lounge, a podcast where Alex Atwood chats with top performers to discover habits, routines, and alchemy that you can put to work in your own life.
So today I'm excited to be talking to Dr. Walk and Talk, Denise Crowe-Clark. Dr. Denise is founder of Soul to Soul Therapy and Consulting. Dr. Clark is a licensed marriage and family therapist, an LMFT, and a board certified telemental health provider. Dr. Clark does this thing that I think is super cool, and it's called Walk and Talk Therapy. And she started it around 2008. So what she does is she calls it fresh air with a fresh perspective, and praises the therapeutic benefits of outdoor exercise. And they're about 50-minute counseling sessions. And in addition to practicing therapy, Dr. Clark has spent the last several years specializing in motivational interviewing, which is a person-centered method for helping individuals towards their own behavioral changes like diet, exercise, weight loss, chronic disease management, alcohol and substance abuse. Motivational interviewing sounds very cool. And here she is. I'm very excited to talk to Dr. Denise Clark. Hi, Denise.
Hi, Alex.
It's
so good to see you.
I feel the same way. So you may not know this, but I've been very curious about Walk and Talk. I've been stalking you and looking up and seeing prior to us even setting up this podcast. So a while ago, I was I have to have an in-depth conversation, because Denise and I have never sat down and really got into it, had a real jam session.
Yeah.
So I figured, why not do it? Let's record it, make a podcast around it, and kind of get this really unique and cutting edge type of therapy that you're up to out there. So I'm really excited. Let's start at the beginning. I want to hear all about your story, because I read your pre-interview and I found some really fascinating things there. So
yeah,
tell me what your childhood was like.
Yeah. So it was interesting actually putting that together, because I tend to think that I'm behind the curve in terms of arriving into the space and everything. And looking back, I realized that all these different things have kind of set me on this path to where I am now. So, I grew up working. I started working at age 12.
I saw that.
Yeah, go figure. But it was a family business. And, so I jumped in. My dad warned me, you've got plenty of time to work the rest of your life. But, 12 years old, nice money. So I started cleaning motel rooms at age 12. And then from there, did that for a few years, transitioned into banking.
So wait. So your family owned a motel?
So one of my aunts owned a motel. Yes.
Got it. And so as motels are, as I know it, a lot of them are family run businesses, and the majority of, I'm actually in the hospitality industry. So I happen to know that the majority of the hotels out there are family run businesses. They're a lot of them are mom and pops. So you worked there. They had you doing child labor early on, as family businesses do. I did the same thing.
Yeah. I chose to do it, but yeah. I guess. Looking back, it was child labor. I was 12 and a half. So So one of my grandmothers was the head of housekeeping. My other grandmother was a housekeeper. I worked under both of my grandmothers, basically.
Fun.
Yeah. So I did that until I was 15. And then the same aunt assisted me in transitioning into a position at a bank. And so at age 15, I started working in the proof department of a tiny little bank that eventually was purchased by another bank. And so I worked from 15 until I graduated college.
In the banking industry?
In the banking industry, yeah.
Did that impact your schoolwork?
It did. So as I am, approaching college age, thinking, what do I want to do with my life? And interestingly enough, if I had it to do all over again, I probably either would have gone the pre-med route or marine science. But It's such an eclectic mix, I know.
Yeah. But you ended up in family therapy, which
I know.
So I'd love to hear that. So here you are. So you're going through college. What was your major and where'd you go to school?
I went to the University of South Carolina. My undergrad was a business. I double majored in finance and management. And it was my plan to climb the corporate ladder once I got out of school. Banking, great career for females in the 80s. And it was. And life had different things in mind for me. Met my husband, actually went to summer school so I could graduate early. And we got married like right out of college. I was barely 21. We just celebrated our 35th wedding anniversary.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And he was military at the time. And even though he was permanently stationed at this particular base, it was a training base. I could not find employment because I was the spouse of a military member at a training base. People are, transitioning through rapidly. I couldn't find a position in banking other than a teller. So at that point, I went back to school for an MBA.
Had you had any kids yet, or just sort of like
no?
No, got it.
No. So I went back to school for an MBA, got those first 3 courses under my belt, and realized we could be stationed somewhere else at any point in time. If I continue down this route, I could lose all of my credits and everything. And just the way things were going at that point in time, we decided maybe right now is not the time for pursuing this degree. So I ended up quitting and coming home, and that's when we started our family. Early 20s. My oldest daughter was born on my 24th birthday. And so I was a stay-at-home mom for close to 20 years.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So the original plan was corporate America. You were literally preparing for it from age 12, from the literally ground up, learning family business, getting the degree, doing all of that. Yeah. I mean, and marriage and 20 years of marriage, so raising a family.
Mm-hmm.
So what was the catalyst that had you start your career as a
marriage and family therapist?
Yeah.
Well, so I stay-at-home mom, lots of side hustles in the meantime, lots of creative things, working with the Mothers of Preschoolers group. I did some merchandising with American Greetings, the card company. I did medical transcription, lots of different things while we were raising our children. Because my husband was gone so much, I homeschooled. However, my oldest child's transition from homeschool to private school, then into public school, and just all the things that come up with being a teenager, with being an adolescent. We hit kind of a critical mass at that point, and we all ended up in family therapy. And she was in individual therapy. I was in individual therapy. And it was at that point that I realized I didn't have a life outside of my children. And my therapist at the time was basically telling me, you need a life. So I started doing some deep soul searching, all the things that you did back then in terms of reading the books, taking the assessments. And I came back to my therapist and I said, I think I've narrowed down what I'm supposed to be. And there were 3 options. But before I could even get it out of my mouth, she said, when are you going back to school to be a therapist? I was like, oh my word, that was the 3rd option.
Wait, so you hadn't had thought through therapy at that point, right?
Other than being
a mom,
a mom and being a client, being a therapy client. Yeah.
Interesting. That's fascinating. And the name of the show is The Alchemist Lounge. And now we're starting to get into some alchemy. That's very alchemaic that conversation happened. Very interesting. Okay, good. Please continue.
So remind me to come back to what one of my early marriage friends told me when I started doing walk and talk therapy. So yes, I went back to school for my master's at that point and began this journey. I did my internship and then was hired in a primary family medicine residency, primary care residency. So I kept finding myself back in medical environments. I did medical transcription. I worked in a doctor's office for a while. And then here I was again in a medical setting. And my master's program approached therapy from a biopsychosocial approach. So body, mind, emotions, your relationships, all of that. So I was getting a real integrated, holistic approach, although still from a Western medicine kind of model. It was at that point that I read an article about a gentleman in New York City who had begun doing walk and talk therapy back in 2004. And at that point, of course, I'd already done my own therapy work. This particular doctor's office that I was working in was an old department store. And you can imagine, old department store, the only natural light were the windows across the front. The rest of it was like a rat maze, little, divided into cubicles and treatment rooms and offices. And it was miserable. So lunchtime and the end of the day, I was bolting out the door for sunshine and to go home and run and, run off the stress of the day. So walk and talk, therapy, time outside in nature, and physical activity checked all the boxes, all the things that I knew worked for me. And I was like, holy moly, I want to do this. But that was not the time and the setting. So I did that for I worked in the doctor's office for a few more years. And fast forward, I was being paid with grant money. I knew that I was not going to be permanently hired by either of the institutions I was working between. So I started my doctoral program. Then my husband got transferred to Atlanta, which is actually back home for me. So as soon as our youngest graduated high school, we transitioned to Atlanta. And we moved into Midtown in a condo 1 block away from Piedmont Park. If anybody's familiar with Piedmont Park in Atlanta.
I'm very familiar. I saw Paul McCartney there.
Gorgeous park. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. And so I thought, if I'm ever going to do this, this is the time. And because I was midway through my doctorate program, it was also the perfect time to do a deep dive into researching walk and talk therapy, the benefits of nature, the benefits of physical activity, the benefits of therapy, and all together. So I jumped in, I did it, I learned on the job, I learned through my research, and here I am several years later, still doing walk and talk. Love it.
Yeah. So let me unpack that just a bit. So there was a time when you were in therapy, the family wasn't there, everyone was going through therapy, and a lot of people go through, really tumultuous times, especially when the adolescent years are there. So many things are evolving in the family dynamic and all of that. Was there a particular circumstance or challenge or something that during that had more impact on the family? In other words, was there something that you learned in therapy or something that maybe you're implementing now that happened to you directly that sort of, specifically was just like a major thing that you're just like, look, there has to be a change here, right?
Yeah.
Which kind of got things going.
Yeah, that's a great question. And when I said that, what I realized when my therapist was saying to me is I needed a life. I was completely enmeshed with my children, and it was fulfilling, and I wouldn't trade those years for anything. And at the same time, I was living for them, and my enmeshment with them was smothering them. And so they weren't able to grow and develop and have their own life. And so it really, really began my understanding of boundaries and distance, enmeshment, fluid boundaries versus rigid boundaries, closeness versus space. There's a sweet spot in there in terms of closeness and giving others space. And being able also to communicate. So my children, my oldest at the time, was struggling to communicate, Mom, you need to back the fuck off. And so that's kind of where that journey started. And yeah,
brilliant insight. And you things can't, grow if you're continuously, overwatering the root or not allowing,
Yeah.
and wow, what fantastic insight that you were able to uncover there. Huh. Did you ever encounter any challenges as you were kind of building the practice? Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, in a lot of ways I still am. So it's intuitive, walk and talk, and people love the idea. Oh, that's beautiful. But everyone thinks, oh, well, that's great for other people, not for me. So building a practice, marketing a practice in general is difficult, but then also building a dedicated walk and talk practice is a challenge. I have been very fortunate in that I'm not the primary breadwinner in our family. And so I've had some leeway. I've been able to play with it, but I've successfully built it and sustained it over the last several years. Of course, mid-pandemic, we moved out of Atlanta. And so I'm still kind of in a transition to the new location and building more business out here. But fortunately, I had a teeny bit of understanding of how businesses function and, based on, so that's part of the puzzle. And it's been a journey, and I'm still on a journey. I'm still figuring it out.
As we all are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So where we met was through the Third Wave coaching program, which is was a very cutting edge program, really focused on integrating psychedelics within programs sort of similar to walk and talk. I mean, it's to me, it's another modality. What and I happen to know that you were one of the more sort of the newer. I think that was your first experience, the one that we were on.
No, not one of the newer, the newest.
The newest. Had absolutely no experience at all.
Yes.
And so I really appreciated that. So what was the journey like? What brought you to the Third Wave coaching program, and then as I understand it, there's also the IPI, the psychedelic assisted therapy program. So what led you to this work?
So yet again, my children. So my youngest reached out at one point and mentioned that a friend of hers had asked her to be their sitter for a journey, a psilocybin journey. And I was like, excuse me, what is this? What is this you speak of? Some mama bear, protective, all that comes with that came out. And she's like, Mom, it's fine. And so I began to do some research, and I was like, wait a minute, this is a thing. This is a thing in therapy. This is another holistic, integrated approach that has such amazing potential. And it's an inside out, bottom up. It's all the things. And I was like, okay, I need to know more about this. I'm a lifelong learner. I'm always adding the next thing, researching the next thing. And so it was just a natural transition. When I began to research it, I had some people who connected me with Third Wave. I began to look into IPI. And so I jumped in with both feet.
Wow. That is something else. What does your daughter think of that?
Both. My children don't know what to do with me.
I mean, that's very interesting. Now suddenly mom is more involved in psychedelics than they are. You had a fascinating spiritual journey and clearly a lifelong learner. Are you incorporating the psychedelic practice into the walk and talk therapy?
So not directly just yet. I'm in a state where the only thing that's legal is ketamine, and still working to integrate that. Still working that angle. But I am offering preparation and integration. I have had some of my clients that were with me before begin to reveal now that they do in fact engage and participate. And so that it's opened up some new conversations. I've had some others reach out. A lot of them want me to facilitate journeys for them or provide them with the medicines and with my license, that's a real sticky place. And so, hopefully soon it will, things will open up, decrim or legalized somehow. I'll be able to do that. In the meantime, I'm taking a very slow and methodical deep dive in building my own experiences and education so that when that time comes, when, not if, I'll be ready. And, building my network, you and others that I can work with and refer out trusted people that I know that are doing good work.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
As I kind of take a broad look at your journey, everything came together perfectly, right? So you started in this path in business and worked in the family business, sort of understood all of the different moving parts that are there when you have to take that journey, marriage, family, you understood all the moving parts there, and then were able to align them both in your practice. And now also taking this insight that again came from your daughter, and now sort of, expanding on that and being able to offer that to people, frankly, that may not know it exists and all of the benefits that are there around it. So that it's really outstanding to see how you've taken that on. So I want to acknowledge that. And I want to hear, are there any other projects that you're working on outside of these that you'd want to share?
I'm dipping my toes in some other areas, trying to build practices that actually complement the psychedelic work, somatic experiencing. And my oldest daughter and I just took a Reiki class earlier this week. So some energy work, somatic work, and other things. I dream of a wellness retreat center. I haven't begun anything in terms of moving in that direction as of yet, but it's here.
That's where it starts. I'm first of all, I'd love to just take part in a walk and talk therapy, because just in general, I enjoy and my family has always been one as a group to go walking after they eat. My family is Persian, so it might be a Middle Eastern thing. I don't know, but I've always found it just in general, everyone goes walking and they kind of talk to each other and the trees are there and there's nature and all that. So more of this type of therapy, I think, is going to do a huge service to not just people's mental well-being, but to their holistic well-being.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the physical activity, like you said, is good for our physical well-being. We all know that. The time, combine that with time outside in nature. I mean, it doesn't have to be a fully immersive nature experience, but a local park where there are trees and grass and that kind of thing boost those benefits. Physical, mental, cognitive, boost mood, boost creativity. And then there's something about the literal moving forward that helps people get unstuck and figuratively move past some of their blocks. And in my doctoral research, I actually researched the client's perspective of walk and talk. And the clients that I interviewed, not my own, but others, they talked about how conversation flowed more freely while walking. Things came up for them in walking sessions that didn't come up for them in office, face-to-face. It felt less intimidating. So, I don't know, kids-wise, how old, if you have kids or how old they are, but, you get somebody in the car beside you and then they seem to start talking. Yeah, it's that.
I was going to say that. So that's right. We, I think I had an old employee of mine used to call it dashboard time.
Yeah.
But when my daughter and I drive to college, so I have kids, one out of college, one in college. But that's when the conversations, that's when I learn about the boyfriends and all of that stuff, because I think, not looking at you and kind of just being there allows you to kind of free flow a little bit. So I agree. I look forward to those drives.
Yeah.
And, the walks aren't something I've done in a long time, but if you really put some, if you really notice how the conversations flowed during walks, they really do sort of flow differently. And it's, and there's a little bit more authenticity that sort of comes out when you're in physical motion.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating.
Absolutely. Yeah. And the other part of that is it's an embodied practice. So it's a bottom-up practice. And clients talk about how they remember things when, like, if they've heard a certain bird during their walk and talk session, when they hear that bird again, or when they go back to the same location and walk again, it brings up those things that we're talking about, we're experiencing those emotions. And so it's a full body practice. And I actually, one of the questions I often get asked by therapists, what do you do about notes? It's amazing because when I come back to my computer to enter my notes, I just think back to where were we in the park and what did we talk about at each of these points? And boom, it comes right back.
Oh, wow. Yeah. That's fat. Wow. So thank you. This is awesome. There's so much information here. I can't wait to come to Atlanta. So you're still in the Atlanta area?
I'm in Flowery Branch, which is about 35 miles northeast of Atlanta.
Wonderful. Well, I will plan within the next 12 months to visit. And when I make these plans, I'm serious about them. You can ask Aaron, you can ask everyone. So I will plan to do that. You and I will connect around that. I can't wait to make an impact on the world with you and all these things that you're doing. Thank you so much. If anybody's interested in learning more about walk and talk therapy or Dr. Denise Clark or anything that she's up to, you can click down in the bio and feel free to reach out to her. I'm sure she's happy to talk more about her practice and how that alchemy can work for you. So
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Dr. Denise. Great to see you.
Alex.
I can't wait to continue to work with you to bring this cutting edge work out to the forefront. And I appreciate your time today on the Alchemist Lounge.
Thanks for having me, Alex.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks for listening in to the Alchemist Lounge. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please share it with others, post about it on social media, or leave a rating and review on Apple iTunes. To catch all the latest from Alex Atwood, you can check out his website at alexatwood.co. Thanks again, and we'll catch you next time at the Alchemist Lounge.